Hey everybody, Necroxis here, and today I'm going to be taking a look at Garrosh Hellscream and his motivation for his current actions in World of Warcraft. Lately it seems as if people have been trying to argue that, Garrosh is simply misunderstood, or, what initially started out as good intentions spiraled into a villainy. While I believe this is true in some regard, I believe the argument leaves out the end of the logical train of thought regarding Garrosh. As I will try to explain at the end of the video, Garrosh is not misunderstood. He, in fact, is the one who misunderstands the orcs, and what could be explained away by ignorance is now replaced by a willful wish to only know the warped sense of history that he believes exists. However, I'm also going to use this video as a basic overview of all of Garrosh's history, because I believe you can't really analyze a character unless you have the full, complete 100% context of where he came from, where he grew up into, and where he is now in terms of explaining how he has become a villain. So this video actually is going to be most largely just a history on Garrosh, and then at the very end I'll give my own opinions on the matter. And that's because I don't like to mix my own personal opinions on a character versus what is a hard fact or history. Because I feel like when you talk about your opinion and a history of a character in the same video, there is a greater chance for those to overlap or begin bleeding into one another. So this first part is very clearly labeled, this is the history of Garrosh, and I'll actually make an annotation to the part where I go into my own opinion of him. So before I begin with my opinion on the matter, let's do a recap on all of Garrosh Hellscream's life. Garrosh Hellscream is the son of the fabled orc hero Garrosh Hellscream, and in many ways a heir to the Warsong clan, which his father was the chieftain of. When the drums of war sounded and the orcish horde was formed to attack Azeroth, Garrosh Hellscream, already a renowned orcish warrior, was the first to drink the blood of Manaroth. Because of his infamy as a warrior, Garrosh's drinking the blood inspired many of the other orcs to do the same. And while this and the First War occurred, however, Garrosh Hellscream was sent to Garradar, a village of brown orcs in Nagrand, because he was infected with the Redpox disease. As such, Garrosh never partook in Manaroth's blood, and was never infected with the demonic fervor that cursed many of the orcs for decades. Eventually, these brown orcs called themselves the Mag'har, literally meaning uncorrupted. After the Horde's defeat during the Second War, the shaman Ner'zhul seized control of the remnants of the orcish horde, and Kargath Bladefist came to Garradar searching for orcish warriors to aid him and Ner'zhul's plans. Here, Garrosh inquired to the fate of his father, and wished to join Kargath and fight with him. However, Kargath ignored him, and then ultimately dismissed all of the Mag'har orcs as weaklings that could do their race a favor by dying. Garrosh then turned to Great Mother Gaia, the elder leader of the Mag'har, to learn about his father, but she refused to answer him. This ultimately caused Garrosh to enter a deep depression. As time went on, Garrosh rose to the rank of chieftain amongst the Mag'har, and when the heroes of Azeroth travel to Outland, they find Garrosh a pessimist suffering from depression. At some point, his father's act of drinking Manaroth's blood had been revealed to him, and this fact, as well as Great Mother Gaia's age, began to worry Garrosh. He believed that once she had died, he would lead the Mag'har to ruin as his father did to the rest of the orcs. The heroes learned that Garrosh knew nothing of Grom's exploits on Azeroth itself, and was also unaware of his defeat of Manaroth, cleansing the Burning Legion's corruption from the orcs' veins. With the help of Thrall and the hero, however, Garrosh learns of his father's fate and begins to gain confidence and strength. Following Illidan's defeat and the prevention of Killjaden's resummoning through the Sunwell, Garrosh accompanies Thrall back to Azeroth. Garrosh is the first Mag'har orc to enter Orgrimmar, and this is a pivotal event in his character's development. Here, Garrosh meets both an old orc soldier from the First War, who praises the Hellscream legacy, and tells him he would be proud to serve under him if he could, saying Garrosh would make his people proud. However, Garrosh also meets a woman who eventually becomes the master of Conquest Hold in the Grizzly Hills named Krenna, who tells Garrosh that Grom is responsible for corrupting the orcs in the first place, and that she is not impressed with him nor his father. Krenna tells Garrosh about the difficulties that Thrall's horde has living in Durotar, and she suggests that Ashenvale Forest's resources would be greatly beneficial to the horde, but Thrall refuses to allow them to settle there. She also tells Garrosh of the Alliance encroachments in the land, such as the dwarves of Baal Modan and the humans of Tiergard Keep. Garrosh becomes angered at Krenna's suggestion that Thrall's actions are causing the orcs to begin weakening as a race, and the two nearly come to blows. Krenna's sister Gorgana explains to Garrosh that Krenna cannot understand that Thrall purposefully settled the orcs in Durotar as penance for their actions in the First and Second Wars. Garrosh cannot understand Thrall's point in doing this, and tries to reason with Gorgona that the children of the Old Horde should not have to suffer the sins of their parents. However, he also tries to defend the Old Horde by saying that what they did in order to survive. Gorgona tells Garrosh that he cannot understand because he is not a green orc, and did not suffer the burdens of Manoroth's curse. This first interaction with Thrall's horde weighs heavily on Garrosh, and soon he begins growing increasingly frustrated with Thrall's actions against both the Alliance and the Scourge. At this point, Garrosh tells himself he will restore the orcs' glory by any means necessary, even if he goes against Thrall. Garrosh later clashes with many of Thrall's advisors over a variety of topics. He wants the Alliance destroyed, while Rhaegar Earthfury wants to maintain diplomacy. He also wants to attack Theramore, while others want the non-aggression treaty maintained. Thrall ends up taking Garrosh as an advisor to a meeting with Varian Wrynn in Theramore, much to the disagreement of Earthfury, and eventually he clashes with the Human King verbally, before Twilight Hammer attacks the meeting. Both Varian and Garrosh accuse the other of sending the assassins to kill one another, and despite the fact that Thrall and Varian had worked out several trading treaties, the meeting's end ruins most of what was gained. Garrosh leaves with Thrall, angry that Varian had insulted the orcs' honor, and thought that leaving the meeting peacefully meant that the orcs had lost face. Garrosh's disagreement with Thrall's leadership eventually comes to a head during a war council about the Scourge with other leaders of the Horde, eventually leading to Thrall and Garrosh facing off in a duel in the Ring of Valor. Thrall wanted to initially scout Northrend as well as consult Jaina Proudmoore to find out what the Alliance wanted to do about the Lich King. Garrosh thought that dealing with the Alliance would endanger the Horde, and just thought they should send all of the Horde's armies to Northrend to crush the Lich King. Their duel is ultimately interrupted when Orgrimmar itself is attacked by the Scourge, and afterwards Thrall agrees to send the Horde to Northrend under the banner of the Warsong Offensive, giving leadership to Garrosh alongside Varrock Sarfang as an advisor. During the campaign against the Lich King, Garrosh and Sarfang's ideologies clash. Garrosh is hot-blooded and brash in his decisions, willing to forsake attacks against the Scourge to strike against the Alliance. Sarfang warned Garrosh about such savagery, seeing the same bloodlust in him as he did in the Old Horde. Sarfang told Garrosh that if he went too far against the Alliance and started to lead the Horde to ruin, he would kill him himself. Despite this, Garrosh focuses heavily on the Alliance in Northrend, ultimately completely forsaking the war against the Lich King to attack the Alliance in several places, such as the Borean Tundra and the Grizzly Hills. Eventually, when both factions assault Icecrown Citadel, a contingent of orcs destroys an Alliance contingent through subterfuge, much to Garrosh's apparent disagreement. Despite his wish to wage war on the Alliance, he claims he still believes in honorable combat. As such, when Thrall and Garrosh meet with Ronan, Varian, and Jaina to discuss Yogg-Saron in Ulduar, Garrosh and Varian do clash in battle, again, after the orcs insult the human, calling him a coward. The meeting ends with no agreement to defeat the Old God, and Garrosh tells Thrall, who expressed disappointment at Garrosh's actions, that no true Warchief would partner himself with cowards such as the Alliance. After the Lich King's defeat, Cairn Bloodhoof travels to Northrend to recall Garrosh home to Orgrimmar. While they sail home, they are attacked by the Kavaldir, and come across an Alliance fleet that was destroyed by these seafaring Vykrul. Garrosh has his ship kill most of the Alliance crew, much to Cairn's distress, saying that they were in Horde's waters. After Cairn sufficiently talks Garrosh down from killing what survivors were left, Garrosh gives them supplies and rations, telling them to inform the Alliance of what they had witnessed. Cairn remains concerned. In Orgrimmar, a hero celebration is thrown, and Thrall gives Garrosh the Gorehowl, his father Grom's old axe. During the elemental upheaval preceding the Cataclysm, Garrosh concludes that the Horde should merely take the resources from the Night Elves, to the disagreement of virtually everybody else in Thrall's cabinet, including Hamul Runetotem, Cairn Bloodhoof, and Thrall himself. Cairn and Garrosh nearly come to blows themselves after a heated exchange on the topic. After a large portion of Orgrimmar is destroyed by fire elementals, Thrall decides to travel to Nagrand on Draenor to try and reconnect with the elements after the Azerothian ones no longer respond to his call. However, Thrall realizes that he must appoint an interim Warchief during this moment, and after disregarding Cairn due to his age, and lamenting the fact that he could not choose the younger Saurfang because of his death in Northrend, he settles upon Garrosh. Thrall argues to himself that Garrosh represents the will of the younger orcs within the Horde, and names him acting Warchief to the dismay of Cairn. However, Thrall assigns Cairn, Aitreg, and Vol'jin to his advisory, and Garrosh accepts. Now, as the Warchief, Garrosh remodels Orgrimmar to be reinforced with metal to prevent Orgrimmar from ever being burned in the future. Garrosh experiences his first moment of political turmoil as Twilight's Hammer, posing as the Horde, attacks and kills a gathering of peace between the Tauren and the Night Elves, leaving only Hamul Runetotem as the survivor. Hamul tells Cairn that the attackers were similar to the attitude of those that Garrosh promoted to serve under him. Confronting Garrosh with this event, Cairn accuses the Warchief of interrupting the meeting. Garrosh denies involvement, but says if he had, he would have proclaimed it to the world. Throughout the heated exchange, Cairn deems Garrosh unworthy of being Warchief, and challenges him to a Mak Gora, an old orcish duel of honor, for the position of Warchief. Garrosh accepts, however insists that the battle be to the death, trying to bluff Cairn from following through. However, he gladly accepts, and ultimately Cairn is killed due to Magatha Grimtotems poisoning Garrosh's axe unknowingly on the Warchief's behalf. After refusing to help Magatha's coup, Bane and Garrosh come to an alliance, and Garrosh begins instructing the Horde to move against the alliance itself. The Horde attacks Gilneas through the Forsaken, and begins pushing into Ashenvale through the Orcs. During this time, Garrosh was also dealing with problems at home regarding the Tauren, floating dangerously close to leaving the Horde, as well as Quilboar intercepting water supplies from Mulgore to Durotar. Eventually, Garrosh, Bane, and Hamul Runetotem stop the Quilboar, and the Tauren are brought back under the Horde's banner without question. Following the Cataclysm, Garrosh uses the catastrophe to drastically increase his war with the Alliance. He pushes the Horde to invade Ashenvale further than ever before. Sylvanas secures control over Lordaeron. Garrosh uses the Shatterspear Trolls to attack the Night Elves in a newly devastated Darkshore. Alliance forces are assaulted in Stone Talon Mountains, and Garrosh spearheads an assault into the Twilight Highlands, focusing both on Twilight's Hammer and the Wildhammer Dwarves, who have now rejoined the Alliance. Varian and Garrosh end up coming to blows once again in Ashenvale, and the king pretty easily overcomes the Warchief before they are separated. Also during this time, Garrosh deals with sabotage from within by Twilight's Hammer agents, and the Alliance pushing back the rampaging Horde. The Alliance defeats the Horde in the Swamp of Sorrows, and begins pushing the attack on Kalimdor, using Theramore as a staging point to launch attacks at the Barrens and Mulgore. Garrosh also severely clashes with Vol'jin and his Darkspear tribe in this time due to his rash actions. In a confrontation at the newly reconquered Echo Isles, Vol'jin tells Garrosh that his faction only remains in the Horde out of loyalty to Thrall, and when Garrosh ultimately goes too far, it will be him, Vol'jin, who puts the arrow in his back from the shadows. Towards the end of Azeroth's war against Deathwing, Garrosh grants amnesty to any Blackrock orc willing to join the Horde, and he subsequently appoints a new leader of the Khorkron, a former Blackrock orc named Malkarok. With Deathwing's defeat and the Cataclysm having ended, Garrosh turns his attention fully to the Alliance, and ultimately successfully blockades Kalimdor from naval support to the Night Elves. He also uses this moment to tighten his control on the factions within the Horde who are more critical of his tactics, such as Vol'jin and Bane. Calling a meeting with the other Horde leaders, Bane, Vol'jin, Sylvanas, Lor'themar, and Gallywix, Garrosh informs them that he intends to destroy Theramore and stunt the Alliance military presence on Kalimdor. Despite protests from Sylvanas, who was worried about the Alliance retaliation at Lordaeron, Garrosh begins putting his plan into action. However, in secret, he has also obtained a much more nefarious weapon, the Focusing Iris, an immensely powerful blue dragon fount of magical energy. The Horde destroys Northwatch Hold in the Southern Barrens, joined by Malkarok, Vol'jin, Bane, Gallywix, and a Forsaken and Blood Elf commander in Sylvanas and Lor'themar's stead, named Fandris Farley and Kelantir Bloodblade. After the victory, Bane calls together a small council to address concerns that Garrosh's actions are causing within the Horde. However, Garrosh is tipped off to this and interrupts the meeting, lashing out at those who would question him. He ensures Bane and Hamul that he himself is not Thrall, and calls Thrall a weak pacifist, pinning all of the Horde's problems on him. waiting until as many Alliance forces were in Theramore as possible, including several Kirin Tor members, their leader Ronan, as well as the majority of Stormwind's 7th Legion. Garrosh enacts his plan, and the focusing Iris Bomb utterly decimates Theramore, killing everybody at the scene except for Jaina Proudmoore, who barely escapes in time. The Horde is divided on the victory. Garrosh, Malkarak, and most of the Kor'kron are elated. However, Vol'jin, Bane, and their forces are disgusted. Bane flees the carnage and runs off into the wilderness to avoid the laughing Malkarak. The battle marked a turning point in several Horde faction leaders regarding Garrosh. Bane and Vol'jin fall back to Thunderbluff and the Echo Islands, respectively, to prepare for their next move. This attack on Theramore, which was meant to drive the Alliance into lethargy, had the opposite effect. Varian Wrynn prepares a fleet to attack Orgrimmar in order to break the blockade around Kalimdor, while Jaina Proudmoore, now traumatized and twisted by the mana bomb's residues, very nearly destroys Orgrimmar with a gigantic tidal wave before being stopped by Kaligos and Thrall. Having talked her off this ledge, Jaina then uses her magics instead to aid Varian's attack on Orgrimmar's fleet. During the naval battles, Varian and Garrosh spar once again for the 3rd time before the battle is cut short, and ultimately Varian's fleet withdraws from Durotar, but not before retaking Northwatch hold for the Alliance. During this battle, Varian learns of the brewing rebellion amongst Orgrimmar and the Horde's faction, hoping eventually to use these rebels to take power from Garrosh in the future. With a large portion of his fleet now destroyed, Garrosh is forced to withdraw the blockade back to Orgrimmar. Speaking with Bane, Garrosh now tells him that instead of simply pushing the Alliance out of Kalimdor, he is now hell-bent on waging a war of total genocide against them. Blaine flat out tells Garrosh that if he should do this, he will lose the support of the Tauren, with Garrosh seemingly smirking at this remark. Following the battle, Garrosh commands every man, woman, and child to assist in the war against the Alliance. He also proclaims that anybody who does not take up his duty will face the wrath of the Kor'kron, which has now become Garrosh's secret police and personal army. At the inn at Razor Hill, the Blood Elf commander Kelantyr Bloodblade and the Forsaken commander Fandris Farley speak to one another about Garrosh's brutality when they are interrupted by Malkarak, who tells them that they should not question their Warchief. They both lie to him and tell them that they have not been doing so, and Malkarak leaves before the inn explodes, killing both the Blood Elf and the Forsaken. After discovering Pandaria and learning that the Alliance had landed on it first, albeit by crash landing, Garrosh orders General Nazgrim to secure the land for the Horde. Around this time, G. Firepaw and the Hojin Pandaren join the Horde after Garrosh tests their fighting prowess against several captured beasts. During the Landfall campaign in the Krasarang Wilds, Garrosh arrives with his forces and immediately constructs Domination Point. Vol'jin, having traveled with the fleet to Pandaria, questioned Garrosh's purpose in coming to this land solely to conquer it, and Garrosh sends him on a special mission with several Kor'kron members. During this mission, it is revealed that the sole purpose was for Vol'jin to be killed under Garrosh's own orders. Having barely survived the assassination attempt, Garrosh is nursed back to health in secret with the help of Chen Stormstout and several Horde heroes. As this occurs, Garrosh has moved against the Echo Isles and the Darkspear tribe, placing the entire area on lockdown with his Kor'kron. Having a Horde hero sent to contact Thrall, the former Warchief aids the Darkspear in reclaiming their island, and Thrall takes up leadership in Vol'jin's absence. Thrall tells the Horde heroes to tell Garrosh that Vol'jin was actually killed and to remain close to him. Garrosh also learns more about the Mogu and the Shah during this time, having requisitioned the Blood Elven Reliquary to learn more about the Mogu's flesh crafting and the ability of some of them to control the Shah. The Reliquary eventually discovers information about the location of a device called the Divine Bell, which can apparently channel and manifest Shah energies. The Reliquary also finds and brings a Shah artifact to Silvermoon City, where it infects several guards, including Grandmaster Ramath and Archmage Aethys Sunreaver, and causes the deaths of several Blood Knights before being stopped. Lor'themar, learning of this, and seeing the deaths of several Blood Elves in Pandaria at the hands of the Alliance who are responding to Garrosh's military advances, finally considers pulling Kul'thalas from the Horde and rejoining the Alliance. It is revealed that Lor'themar and Varian had been secretly negotiating for the Blood Elves to rejoin their former allies. Garrosh and his forces finally learn the location of the Divine Bell. However, they arrive at the scene too late. The Alliance, who was spying on the Horde, reached the location first and teleported the bell to Darnassus. Jaina Proudmoore also bars all magical teleportation to Darnassus from all areas except from Dalaran. Unbeknownst to the Horde, the Alliance, and Aethys Sunreaver, who was leading the Sunreaver faction in Dalaran, Garrosh had a Sunreaver agent under his command, who proceeded to use the only way to Darnassus, which was through Dalaran, to teleport several Ord agents to attack the city and steal the bell for him. Jaina learns of this and subsequently purges the Sunreaver from Dalaran and the Kirin Tor with the aid of the Silver Covenant and Varisa Windrunner, whose husband Ronan was killed by Garrosh at Theramore. After Aethys Sunreaver is rescued from the Violet Hold by Ramath and Lorthamar, the three Blood Elves blame Garrosh for their banishment from the Kirin Tor and Dalaran just as much as Jaina herself. This act, however, also forces the Blood Elves back into the Horde's side, much to the dismay of both Varian and Lorthamar. Having now obtained the bell, Garrosh moves it to another area and begins testing its power. He speaks about the Horde's grand destiny and the bell's ability to remove weaknesses from the orcs, and begins ringing the bell. Upon doing so, Garrosh willingly corrupts several of his Kor'kron with Shah energies, who are ultimately killed by Horde or Alliance heroes. Afterwards, Anduin Wrynn shows up and tries to convince Garrosh not to use the bell's power, although he kind of obviously fails. Garrosh rings the bell again and corrupts his Blade Master champion Ishi with it, and the Horde or the Alliance hero kills him. In the aftermath of the battle, Anduin uses a mallet that the Pandaren created to negate the bell's power to stop Garrosh and turn the Divine's Bell chaotic sounds into harmony. Enraged at his plan failing, Garrosh attacks the bell and shatters it, with the remains crushing Anduin's body. Believing Anduin now to be dead, Garrosh laughs, saying that this will teach Varian Wrynn the price of defying the Horde, and flies off, gleeful at the thought of how Anduin's death will weigh on his father. Despite the Divine Bell's destruction, Garrosh remains dead set on mastering the power of the Shah to this day. During the Kirin Tor and the Sunreaver's war against the Thunder King, Garrosh remains largely occupied at Domination Point, ignoring the Mogu problem. After Leishan's death, Garrosh sends goblin dig teams all across Pandaria looking for a specific artifact. Eventually, a group of Bilgewater goblins finds a Titan holding cell containing the heart of the dead old god Ysarge beneath the veil of the Eternal Blossoms. During this discovery, Melkorok refuses to pay the Bilgewater goblins their previously agreed upon amount of gold, and his Kor'kron seize the control of the artifact. The goblins, after learning this, heavily suggest that they are now going to leave the Horde because of Melkorok's greed. Another unforeseen circumstance of Garrosh's digging in the Veil is that Terran Zu and the Shadowpan Pandaren demand that the Horde leave the Sacred Veil, seeing as the digging as a blight upon Pandaria's land itself. Despite the reservations and the attempt to talk back Terran Zu by Sunwalker Dezko, Terran Zu ultimately only gives the Horde till the end of the season to leave, saying that their leader is a tyrant and wishing them good luck in the future. A bit later on, Garrosh seriously ramps up his crackdown on the rebellion, locking down the heavily troll-populated Valley of Spirits in Orgrimmar and stopping all traffic and trade. Outside of Orgrimmar, Garrosh's forces can be seen preparing for an invasion from the Alliance. Warlord Zayla, leader of the Dragonmaw Orcs who joins the Horde during the Cataclysm, is channeling magics into a proto-drake. Many Kor'kron are training outside, and a bunch of hired Steamweedle cartel goblins are seen making and repairing catapults. Garrosh also sends Kor'kron to lock down Razor Hill, and after Vol'jin returns to the Echo Isles from Pandaria, Garrosh sends them to attack Sen'jin Village. Vol'jin, Chen Stormstout, and Thrall fight off Garrosh's forces and move to attack Razor Hill. Before doing so, however, Thrall tells Vol'jin that he is going to travel to Orgrimmar to try and find sympathizers to their cause, such as Eitrigg and Sarfang the Elder. Bane Bloodhoof also tells Vol'jin that he will support the rebellion once he ensures that his people are out of the city. Vol'jin responds to him by saying Lorthamar will support the rebellion as well, and that Sylvanas will most likely too, as she never was really fond of Garrosh in the first place. Finally, the Gob Squad, now working for Vol'jin and the rebellion, infiltrate a previously unoccupied section of Ragefire Chasm beneath Orgrimmar to look into the disappearances around Durotar. They find a group of Dark Shaman and Corcoran with a stockpile of weapons, proto-drake eggs, and elemental forces. The Gob Squad also finds an intensely locked and reinforced door containing something that they cannot open up or discover. Ultimately, they are pushed back by the Corcoran forces and report the findings to Vol'jin. This is where the story ends in 5.3. I also wanted to note a few personality traits of Garrosh that the history might have missed. Garrosh is a remarkably intelligent strategist on the battlefield. However, unlike Thrall, he is willing to cross lines that many of his own forces and allies deem dangerous. As such, he is largely ignorant of the politics of war and of having a position as the Warchief, something that he freely does admit to Thrall right before he is promoted. As time goes on, however, this ignorance in politics becomes an indignant defiance at those who might question his leadership. At this point in the story, Garrosh sees himself as the end-all be-all supreme figure of the Horde, epitomizing what he believes is the true meaning of being in the Horde. Where Thrall seeks the counsel of his allies, Garrosh merely dictates to his allies what he commands them to do. Where Thrall prefers discreet tactics and subtlety at times, Garrosh will not hesitate to smack somebody literally in the face to get his point across, as he does to Kelantyr Bloodblade when he interrupts Bane's meeting right before the attack on Theramore. Where Thrall prefers peace and trade agreements, Garrosh sees mere conquest and death. The Alliance has no place in Garrosh's world. They are a mere stain to be removed from Azeroth, which he believes is preventing the Orcs from achieving their ultimate power. Garrosh also has no qualms with taking whatever he or the Horde needs, regardless of the ramifications, or to whom what he's taking belongs to. Finally, I think Christy Golden really succinctly explains Garrosh's character when she spoke about him in an interview right before Tides of War was released. She says, quote, "I think Garrosh has, at his core, a weak personality. He was very hostile about his father, and ashamed about his father, and it took Thrall to say, 'Hey, look, you know your dad did some pretty amazing things despite everything.' He had to get that validation externally. He also had to prove himself in battle externally. And now he is surrounding himself with some very bad and dangerous advisors, externally. Because I think at his core, he really doesn't know. He wants to do well. He wants to preserve the Orcs and their pride and their history. But I think he is actually a rather malleable person whose opinions can change. He doesn't have a strong core. So what he believes kind of changes depending on what the situation is and who is talking. And I think that does not make a good, strong leader." End quote. Now, on to the opinion segment. This segment will probably not be that long, because I dislike ever presenting my opinion alongside the facts of the matter, as I mentioned earlier. Because, as I said, the tendency for both to overlap becomes increasingly likely as time goes on. So let me make a huge preface on this section. These are only my opinions, and people are free to disagree with them. If you believe something I say here is incorrect, or you disagree with the premise of it, feel free to do so and include them in the comments. Personally, I love reading other people's theory crafting on the lore. Now, those who defend Garrosh's character as interesting or deep will always seemingly point to the fact that at his core, Garrosh tried to do good. At least good from the Horde's perspective. Like Christy Golden says, he tries to preserve the Orcish history and their power. He was simply ignorant and misunderstood. I don't disagree with any of this argument. However, I believe that those who are making this argument fail to logically continue the line of thought to its conclusion. Yes, Garrosh tried to do good for the Horde, but throughout the many, many times that Garrosh makes mistakes, there is almost always nearly somebody around him that tries to inform him that what he is doing is wrong. And in just about every single case, he deliberately ignores them to the point that his story, when it continues, moves from merely shouting dissenting opinions down to killing people who disagree with him. Garrosh ultimately only wants to live in a world whose opinions are validating his own choices. So he surrounds himself with people who either agree with his opinions or don't question them at all, like Malkorok, like General Nazgrim, like Warlord Zayla. Those who do disagree with him have been entirely phased out of the Horde at this point. So much so that they formed a rebellion to take him down, such as Lor'themar, Vol'jin, Bane, and even Thrall, the former Warchief. Garrosh could have skated by on the excuse of ignorance for perhaps during the time of wrath, as he was still new to Azeroth and its politics and history. But during Cataclysm in the Mists of Pandaria, there are more than enough people surrounding him to fill in those gaps. At this point, Garrosh is not ignorant, he is willfully ignorant. He has eliminated a cacophony and replaced it with an echo chamber. Let's touch upon another issue that ties into this whole Garrosh's ignorance and supposed misunderstanding. His wish to maintain the orcs' supremacy in culture. The problem with this argument is that Garrosh himself seemingly has whitewashed the orcs' past, and those that argue this, saying that he is misunderstood, are either guilty of doing the same thing, or simply ignorant of the lore itself. As opposed to what Garrosh thinks is the history and culture of the orcs, Garrosh's actions are highly reminiscent of the old horde under Gul'dan, the sole supreme leader whose orders are unchecked, and if dissent is found, the originator of it is killed. You had Durotan and Draka as examples for the old horde, and now you have Kelantyr Bloodblade and Fandris Farley for Garrosh's horde. Then we have the corrupting of orc forces into a larger, stronger being to serve purposes of war. Gul'dan famously did so to Orcish children, and in 5.3 we see Garrosh's Kor'kron doing the same beneath Orgrimmar in Ragefire Chasm with these dire orcs. Next, we have the corruption of elements, with Gul'dan famously angering the spirits of Draenor when he raised the Hand of Gul'dan Mountain. And we see Garrosh doing the exact same thing with his summoning of the Kraken, using molten elementals, and employing Dark Shaman. Truly, the only thing Garrosh is missing to recreate the old feeling of the old horde is some type of magical curse that increases the power of his forces at the cost of their will. And honestly, it isn't exactly difficult to see that spot being filled by the Shah, whose powers Garrosh are actively seeking. So in a way, Garrosh is actually maintaining the orcs' history, except it isn't a whitewashed history of honor and glory, but it's one of evil and destruction and manipulation and terrible tactics against their enemies, which ultimately is going to cause the destruction of the horde itself from within, which is the same thing that happened to the old horde under Gul'dan. Ultimately, Garrosh is not misunderstood. In fact, I would say that most people understand him quite well. It's Garrosh himself who does not understand the way that the world works, or his own race's history. Despite the pride that he feels in his heritage, he is actually ignorant of the customs and the orcish race that he is proud of. Instead, he believes in what he thinks is orcish culture. Now, this brings up the question of, is Garrosh a fascinating character, and is he a fascinating villain? My answer would be no, and it's because there is another character who embodies the aspects of Garrosh's character that his defenders claim are his benefits, much better than he himself does. And this character is Illidan Stormrage. Illidan is a misunderstood character who ultimately was trying to do good for his people, and things went downward for him. I honestly don't see that much of a difference between Garrosh's basic premises of ignorance and misunderstanding and Illidan's. Ultimately, the main difference is that Illidan does not come across like a warmongering child with daddy issues. Misunderstood villains have existed in literature since its conception, but the key differences between one that works, such as in Warcraft's own lore like Illidan, versus Garrosh, is that Garrosh's character has bounced all over the place between several extremes since his introduction in the Burning Crusade. Whether or not Blizzard did not know what they wanted to do with the character, or decided to change it at some point, remains to be seen. But it seems as if people who simply want to go along with Blizzard's butchering of the character are simply kowtowing to the mistakes that went into making him. Inconsistency is why Garrosh is a bad character, not any specific in-game lore event. He can be a dick, and there can be dick villains in the Warcraft lore that can be good. But the issue here is not that Garrosh is a dick, it's that he is an inconsistent one. There are many examples of Garrosh being inconsistent during his time in the story, but I'm just going to take the largest one I could find and expand upon that, and let you find the other ones, or tell me in the comments, or however you would like to explore those other ones. Garrosh supposedly is somebody who believes in honor. We are told this repeatedly, perhaps most famously during the, quote, "you are dismissed" scene in Stone Talon, after the Druid school is nuked with a goblin bomb. And yet there are many scenes where this aspect of honor is completely absent in Garrosh's actions. Let's go over some of them, shall we? 1. At Theramore, Garrosh killed one of his highest-ranking commanders because that commander used a bomb to kill innocent civilians, at the Thaldera Grove in Stone Talon Mountains. Yet Garrosh seemingly has no problem doing the exact same thing at Theramore. Now you might say, but Necroxis, there weren't civilians at Theramore. Most of them were evacuated by Jaina Proudmoore. And you know what? You'd be right. But did Garrosh know that? I would say no. Did Garrosh tell Jaina to evacuate her civilians? No, he did not. But even if you want to give Garrosh the benefit of the doubt in this case, he himself argues for killing the children of his enemies. When Saurfang and Garrosh are speaking in Warsong Hold in Northrend, Saurfang expresses the horror at the Old Horde killing Draenei children. And Garrosh's own rationale is to immediately say that they would eventually grow up and take arms against the Horde. You have this event at Northrend, and then one at Theramore, with Stone Talon in the middle. Garrosh bounces between each of these extreme sides of the issue during these events, with no real explanation as to why he does so. Number 2, the Shah. Garrosh seemingly has no problem willingly throwing away the lives of his own forces when using the Divine Bell. He spends certain parts of the story talking about never forsaking honor and that he only believes in honor or combat, and then proceeds to do the exact opposite in the finale of the 5.1 story. Garrosh even has a Magar orc named Ishi, who essentially reveres him as the Warchief, and Garrosh has absolutely no problem willingly corrupting him with the Shah power, despite the fact that he just watched literally all of his Kor'kron forces in the area be killed because they could not control them themselves. Is this supposed to be Garrosh's definition of honor? It makes no sense. 3. The killing of dissenters. This one is simple. If Garrosh was interested in honor, would he not try to get those people who disagree with him to see his side of things? No. At first he would immediately shut them down, and now he's resorting to killing them who disagree with him. This is not the action of somebody who believes in honor. I'm sure somebody will now immediately then try to argue that these things are merely a result of Garrosh's supposed honor clashing with his willingness to do whatever it takes to get the job done. I would actually accept this argument, and like Garrosh a whole lot more as a character, if there had been any other example of him supposedly believing in honor in the game or in the lore itself, besides the one quest in Stone Talon Mountains. So ultimately, why did Garrosh turn out this way? I believe personally it's because Blizzard initially set him out to make a character who was likable and flirted on the edge of morality, identical to how Illidan Stormrage worked, who is arguably one of the most popular characters in all of Warcraft's lore. The problem with this is that when Blizzard made Garrosh step over that moral edge, they didn't make him return until it made the story awkward. It's why you see him bounce from the extremes of Burning Crusade back to Wrath, and then to Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria. I think writing these instances of inconsistency off as logical story arcs does a disservice to some of the truly good characters of the Warcraft franchise, like Illidan, Jaina, or even Thrall before Cataclysm. The result of this inconsistent bounce has resulted in the majority of the fanbase disliking the character, regardless if it's a standpoint from the story or somebody who just enjoys literature, or both. After ruining the possibility of Garrosh simply being misunderstood, it seems pretty clear to me that Blizzard has just decided to make him unabashedly evil so that we could get rid of him at the end of the Mists of Pandaria storyline and move on. This is the only logical reason why I could understand them dropping any and all pretense of Garrosh still believing in honor after the quest in Cataclysm. He has become some odd amalgamation of character traits that are diametrically opposed to one another, and I believe Blizzard realized this and just want to move on to the next story. At this point, though, I think that my thoughts have begun the transition from thought-out response to stream of consciousness, so I'm just going to end that here. If you have any comments or thoughts on any of my opinions on the matter, feel free to also leave those in the comments and I will try to address them to the best of my ability. If you guys liked this in-depth look at Garrosh Hellscream and want me to do other characters, let me know. And let me know which characters you'd like to see, too. With the lull of content between 5.3 being released, at some point soon, I believe, and the 5.4 PTR going up, I'm available to do some more specific topics. If you enjoyed this video and want to help me out, the greatest way you could do that would be to like, subscribe, and share this video to any of your other lore fans who think you might be interested in this. Thanks again, everybody. My name, as always, is Necroxis, and I will see you for our next look at Warcraft's lore. Farewell.